We're not sick.
I'm gonna shoot your dad in the mouth.
Here's the thing. Being a kernel driver doesn't make you a rootkit. Kernel anti-cheat, a controversial topic that I'm ready to get bullied about. Before we dive into it, let's talk about the difference between the kernel and the user space. It's an important concept to understand to even grasp the concept of a device driver. Imagine, despite it being so far-reaching in 2025, you own a house with a front yard.
Oh, do ya?
When you download and install a game, the game only exists in your front yard. When it needs stuff from your kernel, it knocks on the front door and asks politely, sometimes with a special password.
I'm ugly and I'm dead alone.
To be able to enter any desktop, there are many layers you have to go through, and it becomes harder and harder the deeper you go.
I have a balance and I'm not afraid to hang my...
And this is for any operating system. You're a homeowner, right? When someone enters your yard for a delivery, you're inviting some new coworkers over for a drink, you have new neighbors that you haven't seen before giving you a housewarming gift. These are all normal activities someone with a house might partake in. And the better you know that person, the more personal and vulnerable access they might get. Your best friend can hang out with you in your bedroom, and you might even brag about how much money you have in your safe. You wouldn't do that to the mailman, right? This is exactly how the kernel deciphers what's safe and what isn't. System calls are familiar, vetted behaviors. The kernel decides whether to approve them and how much access they will grant. A game might ask for memory to load textures or track your inputs. Totally normal. But how and where that memory is given, that's the kernel's decision. Now imagine this. In Amazon, delivery guy comes over to deliver something you didn't order. He's wearing a vest that has a logo that looks off. Would you even let them through the gate? Maybe you think, sure, I probably ordered something at 2 a.m. and forgot. So you let him in the yard. When he starts asking for weird, unrelated stuff, like if you're married, have children, and what your social security number is, that's when you tell him to GTFO.
And this is what, in this day and age, having cheaters in the user space looks like.
It's fairly easy to spot, and the only real way that it works is if there isn't any anti-cheat in the first place. If a cheater does just enough to blend in, they're already in your property, poking around the rose bushes. User space anti-cheat watches other apps. It checks memory, scans for injected code, maybe even looks for weird mouse movements or suspicious overlays. On Windows, it's incredibly easy to see what's running on your system from just the user space alone. You can open Task Manager, see every process name, get their process IDs, parent-child relationships, memory usage, even which DLLs are loaded. All without needing an admin. This is partly due to Windows exposing a lot through system APIs like enum processes, open process, and read process memory. If that sounds powerful, it's because it is. A simple user space program can scan every other app's memory, even inject its own DLLs, just by calling the right APIs. Now on Linux, not so much. Sure, Linux has a /proc file system, which exposes a lot of system internals, but it's tightly permissioned. Try reading memory from another user's process. You'll hit a permission denied unless you're root. Injection code, much harder without escalating privileges. There's also more namespace isolation through things like C groups and user namespaces, which sandbox processes by default. Linux security can be summed up as a decentralized approach built around the question, who are you? This openness on Windows is why anti-cheat developers have to work harder and cheaters have it easier. If everything's visible from the front yard, you're gonna need security guards that live in the basement.
Anti-cheat opens up a unique problem when it comes to secure systems. Imagine I'm not a malicious actor coming from an external source like in a DDoS attack, but the malicious actor is you. The threat is already in the house. When the attacker is the user themselves, the system can't rely on traditional boundaries. A game running in the user space automatically has fewer privileges than the cheater trying to exploit it. Defending against someone who already has local access is one of the hardest problems in security.
User space cheats typically exploit accessible APIs or game logic to manipulate data indirectly, like adjusting inventory values in Minecraft by interacting with Java data structures. Wall hacks in games like Counter-Strike or Fortnite alter how the objects are rendered at runtime, making walls invisible. Aimbots target enemies by automatically adjusting players' aim, manipulating the game's aiming system to lock onto targets without manual input. These cheats don't need kernel access. They just exploit poor encapsulation or exposed methods, highlighting how critical data integrity is at the development level. User space anti-cheats rely on techniques like heuristics, signature scanning, overlay detection, like catching hooks into DirectX, OpenGL, or Vulkan, input analysis, process checks, or DLL injection detection on Windows. But If I'm a cheater, why play in the yard where it could easily be seen? And that is why kernel-level cheats exist. They skip the front gate. They become part of the plumbing. They hide in your house.
So hide your kids, hide your wife, and hide your husband because they body out.
But hold on, what exactly is a device driver? First off, there's a distinction between hardware drivers and software drivers. A hardware driver is what most people think of. It's the glue between your physical device and the operating system. Let's use Wi-Fi as an example. You've got a Wi-Fi chip inside your laptop. Think of it as a little silicon gremlin that speaks binary and radio waves. It runs its low-level software or firmware that's separate from your operating system. This firmware runs directly on the chip's microcontroller, often handling things without involving the main CPU or OS. The OS doesn't micromanage every detail. It just says things like connect to this network or send this packet. Interpreting the firmware directly would be needlessly complex. That's why kernels across all operating systems are pretty modular. They rely on drivers to handle the chip-level details. The Wi-Fi software driver is a middleman that translates between the OS and the chip, turning those high-level requests into register writes, DMA transfers, or firmware commands that the chip understands. It's a purely software, or what kernel engineers like to call logical, controller of the real hardware. Without that driver, the OS might as well be trying to order takeout from a toaster.
Taste the goodness of the biscuit.
Now this part might take you through a loop. All drivers are software, but not all drivers are for hardware. Software drivers can be a controller for hardware, but not always. For example, a virtual network adapter like a VPN or a file system filter driver acts like a device to the OS. It lives in the kernel, intercepting or transforming things on the way to the hardware. VPNs are not attached to any particular piece of hardware. They direct already existing network traffic happening on the OS. And that's where anti-cheat comes in. Kernel anti-cheats will install themselves as drivers, but instead of translating commands to real hardware, they're watching memory, input devices, process activity, all from the most trusted layer of your machine. The question isn't just what they're doing, it's whether they're doing it responsibly. If you've written C++ before, you might know the term RAII, or Resource Acquisition is Initialization. It's a fancy way of saying, if your code acquires a resource, it should be clearly scoped and responsibly released. That principle of bounded control and cleanup is a good model here too. A kernel driver, especially something as powerful as an anti-cheat, should have a clearly defined purpose, a limited scope, and clean behavior. That's not just good software hygiene, it's essential for stability and user trust. Unfortunately, some anti-cheat systems in the past have been deployed more like rootkits. Root refers to the highest level of system access, and kit refers to the tools used to maintain and exploit the access. These drivers don't just monitor, they hide themselves, obscure their actions, and sometimes persist even after the game closes.
I'm still here, guapo!
When that happens, they're no longer just watching for cheaters. They may be inspecting memory, tracking input devices, analyzing processes, or even altering how your system behaves, all invisibly. That's not just aggressive, it's malpractice. It abandons the very principles that make privileged software trustworthy in the first place. But here's the thing. Being a kernel driver doesn't make you a rootkit. What do all of these drivers have in common? Intentional, minimal scopes, data integrity, strong cryptography, and small attack surfaces. These drivers are designed to do one thing and one thing only, well. Whether it's connecting your Bluetooth headphones, displaying graphics on your screen, or making your webcam work properly, these drivers stay focused on the task at hand. Anti-cheat drivers shouldn't be responsible for things like system-wide security, protecting you from malware, or scanning your entire system for suspicious activity. That's just simply not their job.
You can hire someone else.
That's why we have other tools in place to handle that. On Windows, for example, we have Windows Defender, a robust security tool designed to scan for and protect against malware, ransomware, and other threats to your system. Its job is to monitor and protect the entire operating system, not just the game you're playing. This leads to a key security issue. The bigger the scope of a driver's functionality, the greater potential for security vulnerabilities. Now for the elephant in the room. The big brother problem. Not everything has to be sent to the cloud. I'm not proposing some groundbreaking new algorithm here. Just sketching a concept for what a minimal, local-only anti-cheat in the kernel could look like. Something focused with clearly defined responsibilities. On a purely local system, you could have something that hook and monitors I/O events, validate memory regions and runtime behavior for the scoped process, perform cryptographic handshakes, verify the integrity of the local game process, detect tampering with minimal access to the rest of your system, all without needing to phone home, all of your private data. Now, open sourcing might not be realistic for a massive competitive game company, but at the very least, they can put out thorough documentation about their drivers. Even Microsoft does this to an extent. The anti-cheat doesn't even need to collect what you typed, just how it was delivered. For example, instead of showing that the user pressed WASD, it can log process X sent synthetic keyboard input to window Y every 15 milliseconds. It could hash key memory regions of the game and compare them against known good values, or perform a shared secret handshake between the game and anti-cheat to confirm they're in sync. It can even have a data integrity model that says anything that gets sent to the game needs to hook through me first. It's like your own personal anti-cheat hooker.
Yeah, she was a fairy with a fatty. I'm my daddy. He want grab it.
But here's the problem. Game companies don't make money from secure system software. They profit from player retention, cosmetics, and tournament integrity. Their goal isn't to build elegant drivers, it's to stop cheaters before players quit. That means anti-cheat teams operate under brutal time pressure, patching exploits like firefighters, not engineers. Meanwhile, a systems company can spend years refining a kernel module, while game studios are lucky if they get just weeks. So then, what's the alternative? For a long time, VPNs didn't need to be in the kernel. In fact, they still technically don't. If you ever played around with a system calls from CLI, you know you can route traffic entirely from the user space. But times have changed, we needed more speed, so folks behind WireGuard made the call, move into the kernel, build a fast, secure VPN as a device driver. The lesson? If you don't need to be in the kernel, then don't. But these days, gamers are loading rootkits to win ranked matches. The line's already been crossed, so if you're fighting back against kernel mode cheats, hardware spoofers, and stealthy memory scanners, you do need that level of access. That's why, yes, we've reached to the point where installing a device driver is just part of playing a video game. It's wild, but it's real. But build the bunker before the bombs drop. Lock a minimal, well-tested kernel driver in place. Lean, boring, and impossible to exploit. Then shove all your risky, fast-changing detection logic upstairs in the user space. The kernel isn't the enemy, but treating it like a panic button, that's how you get another rootkit. Now, there's a common misconception that purely user space anti-cheats are the safer, less invasive option. And sure, they have their advantages. They don't touch the kernel, so they're less likely to crash your system or introduce major security risks, but that doesn't mean they're harmless. User space anti-cheats often rely on analyzing game logic and player behavior, which can be just as invasive, but just in a different way. And now we've entered the era of AI-powered anti-cheat. These systems don't just react to what's happening, they learn from patterns. That means collecting a ton of data, player inputs, reaction times, mouse movements, and in-game decisions, and the works. To train and refine these models, that data is often stored long-term, and in some cases even shared across gamers or developers. These AI systems can still miss cheaters too, especially the subtle or novel ones. Worse, they can misfire and flag legitimate players just because their playstyle is unusual. And since AI decisions are based on prior training, cheaters can design new tools that slip past undetected. This leaves us with a system that can be evasive, valuable, and opaque, all while making high-stakes decisions about who gets to keep playing. It's undeniable that kernel-level anti-cheat has access to more system data because it operates at the deepest level of the OS. This grants its ability to monitor processes, memory, and input devices with a level of insight that user space anti-cheats can't match. But a kernel driver doesn't need to be invasive. A kernel driver can be focused and local with a well-defined scope, so the people who make these anti-cheat drivers seriously just need to get good.
Left me unfinished!
Some guy off of Reddit named Linus from Linus Rants really puts it well. Honestly, you can think of these quotes as some sort of commandments when it comes to kernel development. Companies have long used cloud-based solutions for enhanced intelligence, but this has also raised privacy concerns due to the transmission and storage of sensitive data on external servers. It's all about finding the right balance. At the end of the day, a hybrid approach, including kernel anti-cheat, will probably always be necessary to detect sophisticated cheats. But a good start would be better documentation and transparency about what data is being sent to the cloud. I hope this video helped clarify the role of device drivers and some good practices for anti-cheat. I look forward to seeing these ideas applied in the future. Thanks for watching.
That's your daughter. You know she gets that from you.
Dad! Dad! God damn it, let go of him! Oh.
Stop. Now.
I love you